I apologize, sir, but you'll need to relocate to economy. The flight attendant's tone was stern yet detached, as if she were addressing not a grandfather, but merely another boarding pass glitch. The elderly man blinked in confusion, already comfortably seated in his business class spot, seat belt secured, weathered hands resting on his lap. His suit was creased, his tie slightly askew, yet his posture remained dignified, upright, and proper. He glanced around as other passengers averted their eyes. "But I was assigned this seat," he said softly, holding up a boarding pass with trembling fingers. "There's been a reassignment," she replied brusquely. "We're overbooked. Someone else paid full fare. I need you to come with me now." No apology, no explanation, just a decision handed down by a system that overlooked his face, his medals, or the burden of years on his shoulders. He unbuckled slowly, rising as other passengers whispered. One muttered, "Guess you got to pay to stay." Another snickered. The man remained silent, simply picking up his bag, worn leather adorned with old tags from destinations most people only read about, and shuffled toward the rear of the plane. Yet 5 rows back, a teenage boy whispered to his mother, "Mom, is that the guy from the ceremony? The one on TV?" His mother's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. They weren't the only ones who recognized him. 2 rows over, a businessman lowered his newspaper, watching the old man with increasing unease. An army vet in coach sat up straighter, narrowing his eyes, for this was no ordinary man. His name was James Thornton, a decorated Air Force colonel, Vietnam survivor, recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross, and just last month, he had been honored by the Department of Defense for 50 years of humanitarian flight missions. He'd saved hundreds of lives, not in a boardroom, but in the air, under fire, through storms most pilots wouldn't dare face. And now this man was being relegated to the back of the plane like baggage. But fate had different plans. As James neared the economy aisle, the cockpit door swung open, and out stepped the pilot, tall, clean-cut, with silver wings on his uniform and fire in his eyes. He scanned the cabin until his gaze settled on the man being quietly humiliated. Then his voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Is there a reason Colonel James Thornton is not in his assigned seat?" Every passenger turned. The flight attendant froze mid-step, color draining from her face. "Captain, there was a ticketing issue. We had to reassign." The pilot raised a hand. "Stop." He walked toward the old man, standing before him like a cadet before a general. "Sir," he said, his voice firm yet brimming with emotion, "I'm Captain Mark Ellison. You flew with my father in 1971 over Laos. He told me the only reason he made it back was because of you." James blinked, his eyes glistening. "Your father, Robert Ellison?" "Yes, sir," the pilot replied. "You carried him out when his bird went down. He always said if I ever met you, I was to stand at attention and shake your hand. And that's precisely what he did." The pilot stood straight, saluted, and then offered his hand. Passengers began clapping. Captain Mark Ellison turned to the attendant. "Find the person who took this seat and move them to mine. I'll fly this plane from the jump seat if I have to. Colonel James Thornton sits here." "No," James said softly, trying to wave it off. "Son, that's not necessary." But the pilot smiled. "With all due respect, sir, yes, it is." The flight attendant stammered an apology. The other business class passenger, now grasping the weight of the moment, stood without protest. James was escorted back to his seat, not by airline staff, but by the pilot himself. As he sat down, passengers rose, applauding louder, some wiping away tears. One man in a suit leaned over and said, "Thank you for your service, sir." A woman across the aisle extended her hand. "You deserve more than this seat. You deserve a statue." But James only smiled and nodded humbly. I was just doing my job. Captain Mark Ellison returned to the cockpit, but before closing the door, he turned and gave one final salute to the man who had once saved his father's life. The cabin grew quiet, though hearts were roaring. When the plane landed hours later, dozens waited to let James exit first, a few even asking for photos. Not for fame, but to capture the moment they witnessed true respect being restored. James Thornton never sought recognition, never needed it, but that day, the sky granted him something greater than medals or headlines. It gave him justice. It reminded everyone watching that heroes don't wear capes. They wear time, humility, and silence like armor. Before we conclude this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop a karma in the comments below.